All right, yeah, thanks for that. Great to see such a good turnout for the .NET user group. Pretty excited. Didn't think we'd have this many people, and obviously we're streaming, and it will be put online for be recorded. So that's awesome. Also, I'd just like to say thank you for inviting me here to present this talk, and it is a talk that I gave at DDD Brisbane last year. So some of you may have seen it. If you're at DDD, I assume you picked it because it would have been your first preference. So I apologise if you've seen it. And it will be slightly different, but you know, for the large part, it's going to be the same. So what is my talk? It's the 10 best things I learnt as a consultant that can be used by anyone to achieve better outcomes. Now it is mainly applicable to us in the software industry, okay? But it does carry over. And one of the complaints I got at DDD Brisbane, one of the feedback items was it can be used by anyone. And it even says that in the title. So I didn't take that as a real big negative because I'm like, that's what it's about. So I did a right job. The other thing is, the other complaint I got, which was interesting, was someone couldn't see the slide. So if you're in a position and you're thinking, I can't see the screen, just move. Right? I can't change that. So they were the two biggest things. So, you know, I think that's probably some pretty good feedback there. Pretty good sign that my talk is okay. So who am I? I am, obviously, Turtle has introduced me. I am Wade Baglin. I am a lead engineer at MakerX. I am a conference speaker now. No more coming soon. Check. I'll add a user group to that as well, so don't worry. And I do work on a little bit of open source stuff. And it is open source stuff that is .NET related. So first and foremost is PetaPoco. You may have heard of it. It's a micro ORM, very, very old. I do a bit of maintenance on that, and it's still used by a lot of people. The other one is, if you like awesome lists, I moderate the awesome .NET list. So if you want to go have a look at that, you want to contribute, it's just a PR away. Dead links, better links, just PRs and goes through pretty quickly. Just a little forewarning that this talk is largely opinionated, okay? Heavily opinionated according to my notes. And look, you know, you may not agree with it all, and that's fine, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm actually open to chatting about it. And, you know, maybe you can sway my opinion, maybe I can sway your opinion. After all, they're just opinions, right? And opinions change over time. So opinions of the past, for me, are different to the ones I have now, and they will be different to the future. And it also happens at an industry level. I hope no one here is using .NET Web Forms, right? But there was a time where we would have been doing a talk about .NET Web Forms, and the opinion would have been somewhat of high regard for the technology. And we now know that, no, that's not how we do it, all right? So, opinions, pretty straightforward. Oh, and it may contain traces of facts, just minimal ones. Okay, number one, let's get into it. A hard talk is always easier earlier and much harder later. And so look, before we dive into that, let's just cover off the basics here. Most of us would have seen this diagram here. So it's the, you know, it's not different to any textbook diagram. It's the sender, receiver, message, feedback, and you know, we've got a few things. But the key things here is we've got a sender, a message, a receiver, and feedback, okay? And the channel is just whatever you're communicating over. But what is a hard talk? Well, a hard talk is any situation where you perceive the feedback will be uncomfortable, okay? So that's a hard talk, right? Pretty basic. But specifically, it's when we're really worried about this feedback, right? We're worried to the point where we're going to put it off. And we might be worried because if we're talking written words, it might have tones of disappointment. The tones could be judgmental, defensive, maybe concerned, maybe angry. Or if you're speaking to someone face-to-face or on Zoom or Skype, I probably don't do that anymore, Teams, Slack, Could be body language. So they might be shaking with rage at hearing the news. Ideally, people shouldn't shake with rage anymore. I mean, we've kind of left that in the past, but they could be crying into their hands with this bad news, okay? And, we've put it off. And so why do we put off a hard talk? Well, because, most of us will try and avoid conflict and we'll try and avoid uncomfortable situations. And so it's actually quite natural for us to put off a hard talk. But why should we not put off a hard talk? Well, not putting off a hard talk gives us time to plan, change directions, take action, okay? So, and the more time we give ourselves, the better we are setting ourselves up for success based on this hard talk. So let's just look at a few examples here. If we're talking about we're working on a product, we're having to deal with a team, maybe that team is outside of our company, and they're proving to be problematic, and you're potentially souring the relationship by pestering them, and you call them out right at the end date. So the product's not shipping, there's issues, and you're like, well, this team, if you don't call them out early, their response will be, why didn't you say something, okay? And, it's a fair point. We should have called it out early. We should have said, hey, look, we're having trouble working with your team, we need to solve this, etc. The other one is, maybe we've picked Tech A, and Tech A is proving problematic. And so having a hard talk is potentially admitting that we've made a mistake here. We've picked the wrong tech, potentially delaying and increasing the associated cost with that tech mistake. But look, if we have a hard talk here and we admit the mistake, we can avoid situations like the sunk cost fallacy, which is where you invest because you've invested. And lastly, we've got these personal talks that can be hard. Now, a personal talk could be you're in a management position and someone's contract's not going to be renewed because maybe there's funding issues, and you put it off because you don't want to deliver bad news. But in that situation, it's not fair to put it off. So the earlier we can talk to that person, even though it's bad news, the better outcome for them because they have more time to react. They have more time to plan. So it's not just for us, it's also potentially for the person we're talking to or the team. All right, number 2, always give yourself room for delivery estimates and try to avoid specific dates as much as possible. And so, estimations are hard. I think everybody in this room understands that, right? If you've been in software more than 5 minutes, you go, estimations, I hate them. But we should avoid dates, right? And the reason why we do that is because dates push us away from the meaning of what an estimation is. So if you say something like, this will be done end of June, and you're now in the start of July, someone might say, hey, you said it'd be done end of June. It's like, I said it was also an estimation. Doesn't matter. We've given a date, right? We've given a point in time. And the other reason why we're going to give ourselves room here is because we want to also allow things that we haven't foreseen. So we might have sickness. We might have critical work. There's a multitude of things that come in, and room in this situation is setting us up for success. So if we're avoiding dates and we're giving ourselves room, how do we communicate? Because people aren't going to accept, people aren't going to accept nothing, like it'll be done when it's done. So what do we do here? Well, I think we give a range, okay? And so let's just jump into an example. This is Lundberg, if you know the office space, if you didn't get the reference. And Lundberg wants A and B delivered ASAP. And so in our head, like if we're the person that Lundberg's talking to, we're thinking, I can do A midweek, and I think I'm pretty good at, delivering B end of the week. So my first option is I can deliver A midweek, and I can deliver B at the end of the week. Okay, that's what we thought. We could say that. The second option here is I can deliver A by the end of the week and B next week. Oh, there's a little bit of room in there. Nice, not bad. Third option here is I'll do my best. However, it's more likely A and B are delivered next week. So you're not getting it this week. I'm thinking A and B next week. Now, some of the feedback I got by Matt, was sometimes you can't do the third one, right? That's our pick. That's the one we want. That's the one we're aiming for. It's the best one because it sets us up for the best success, takes the pressure off. But yeah, look, I understand that in the real world, sometimes 3 is not an option. You're going to get pressure. But you can always fall back to number 2, all right? The middle ground. And it's the middle ground because we've left ourselves some room. If something goes wrong and we don't get A midweek, it's all good. We've got to the end of the week. If something goes wrong and we get A by the end of the week, and we go, whew, thought that would be midweek. Lucky I didn't commit to B on the Friday. B can happen next week, okay? And that's why, just give yourself some room. Now, Lumberg doesn't really understand like which one of these is the appropriate one. So there's a good chance if we go that one, that'll just be fine. And if we deliver it beforehand, Lumberg's going to be happy. What Lumberg's not going to be happy though is if we do not nail that first one and that's the one we picked. That does not set us up for success. Number 3, a lot of relationship building is done away from the workspace. Now, as a consultant, I was always astonished at how quickly strong relationships could be built away from the workspace. And I always made it a point when I was going into workplaces of chatting to people in the kitchen, just anywhere that wasn't directly related to work. Now, you can't just chat about work away from the workspace, okay? Because that is going to have the opposite effect of what we're trying to achieve here. But what we're trying to do is just build relationships. And now this happens, you might be like, oh, I'm not a consultant, this doesn't relate to me. It's like, well, it does, because there's people in your company that you can start building relationships with. And the reason why we might want to build those relationships is because if we do have to engage with these people as part of our work, an existing relationship there, whether it's just been formed in the kitchen, will set you up. It'll be a lot better than a brand new relationship in the workplace, okay? Now, a few things. Social events. Not everybody's cup of tea, but pretty good at building relationships, right? People are away from the office. They're pretty happy. Maybe there's a quokka. Maybe there's a bit of turtle bowling. Maybe there's this cool guy with sunnies thinking about, what's happening in the world. I don't know, like it's, we can build relationships and it's a short duration, but a great opportunity to build relationships. Or maybe, we're in the kitchen, we're talking about things. Maybe getting coffee and we bump into people that we work with day to day. We can talk to them. The other thing is obviously flexible work, COVID, making this hard. And you might be like, I work from, I'm full-time remote, okay? So I'm not necessarily seeing the people I'm working with day to day or have that opportunity. So what I'm looking for here is another avenue. And so, maybe you've got Teams, maybe you've got Slack, and maybe on there's channels that aren't dedicated to work. And so you can jump on those channels if they're of interest to you and just start chatting away. Maybe it's music, maybe it's woodworking, I don't know. But there's ways to build those relationships. Number 4, context. I can't say this enough. Context, context, context. My advice is always to include context with your communications. And including context does a number of things. It reminds the recipients of what you're sending to. It reminds them about what you're talking about, right? It also helps narrow the shared understanding of what we want to talk about. And so what do I mean about this shared understanding? We'll take this slide, for example. Everyone in this room right now is forming a view of what this slide means or what I'm trying to communicate here. And the more I talk about it, the more all those views narrow in to becoming sort of aligned. Now, they'll never fully align. We'll never get to the point where I've communicated exactly what I want to communicate with this slide and everybody understands it. Like, that's just not going to happen, all right? That's just human nature. But the more I talk about it, the more we align. And so that's why in giving context in communication is important, because we're helping narrow that alignment. And the other thing is, it's also setting us up for that person to forward that communication on. Maybe they're not the right person for this, okay? And maybe they're like, I'm super busy. Oh, I've got to send this on. I've got to type out. I've got to include the context. But if I got an email with context, and we will go through this example, then I'm like, sweet, I can just forward that on, right? It's got everything there. And so that's why it's really powerful. So let's just run through an example here. So, we've got an email that Maggie's sending to Jen. We've got some context and we've got a few pieces here. So I'm just going to read it out if you haven't already read it. It says, "Hey Jen, reaching out to continue our discussion of that production area we were chatting about in the stability meeting the other day. For reference, the GitHub issue is 889, where payments sometimes decline when the customer uses the LTM credit card. I followed up with our LTM representative, Craig, and they cannot explain why it's happening. They've suggested we focus on the payment provider gateway, XYZ. Can you help arrange a meeting with XYZ and us, including Emma, to discuss this? I appreciate your help. Emma knows the most about these failed payments. So if we can get her and XYZ on the same call, I'm confident we can resolve this payment issue before the Christmas rush. Thanks, Maggie." Okay, context, it's there, right? It's also bleeding into the rest, but Maggie can forward that on without, it's just super simple, right? I've set Maggie up to either handle that or forward it on. The other thing I tend to do, and I'd suggest you give it a go, your mileage may vary, not that we use mileage in Australia, but you get what I mean. Introduce what you want to talk about what you want to talk about, and then summarize it. And keep it to one topic. It's not mentioned on the slide, but when you put multiple things in communication, sometimes people focus on the priority and the non-priority items get lost. And so lastly, just remember, like, communication is hard. And some of us are better at it than others, but what I would also suggest is that everybody should be committed to trying to improve their communication. It's going to happen whether you like it or not, but a little active thinking, a little active sort of participation in improving it, it can go a long way. And I would recommend this as a start if you're thinking about, oh, how can I better communicate via email or Slack or etc. in written form. All right, so my favorite. One of my favorites. I got a few favorites, but this is, like, let's just be honest. It says shit your pants with confidence, and I really like being able to swear it when I'm giving a talk. I think it's kind of liberating in some regard. So, you know, growing up, we're kind of taught to be successful, we have to fight for it. In movies, we've got evil people trying to stop the protagonist from succeeding. You know, it's the same throughout TV series, books, computer games, plot lines filled with jealousy. And if you watch the news, read the news, however you consume your news these days, TikTok, YouTube, I don't know, maybe you still buy a newspaper. You'll find it's mainly stories about horrible people, right? And so it's really easy to forget that in reality, the people you know, the people you trust or you work with, deal with day to day, they're inherently good, right? They're not evil. They're not trying to create all these twisted plot lines behind the scene to bring down your demise. They're good people, right? And so that brings me to my main point. Shit your pants with confidence. And so what exactly do I mean by this? Well, what I mean is in any situation you're feeling nervous, I want you to remember this. The people around you, the people that you're potentially being nervous in front of or are being nervous in front of, they want you to succeed, right? They're there for you. They're backing you. Their thoughts, empathetic of nature, your emotional state, they're all with you, right? So take this talk, for example. You want a good talk, right? You don't want me to be a nervous wreck. You don't want me to deliver a subpar talk. You might not appreciate swearing, but you're like, well, I can forgive that because it was a good talk, right? And so it's fine, you know. Moving on, like we all get nervous. And I don't think, you know, anybody here could say, I've never get nervous, right? There's no situation in which I get nervous. If there is, good for you. But for 99% of the other people out there, we all get nervous in certain situations. But I think there's a few things we can do to help this, right? We can fake the confidence. So we might be nervous. We might be giving a talk. It could be a showcase. It could be a meeting in which you have to present. It could be a tough talk, you know, like there's multitudes of reasons why you might get nervous. But, you know, if you fake confidence, if you look like you're in control and you look like you know what you're doing, then does it really matter, right? And the other thing is when you combine the two, so if you combine the fact that everybody wants you to succeed with you faking it, you'll transition to not be faking it in no time. Like that confidence will come from an area of confidence rather than like you putting on a show, a facade, you know, you're masking. And you know, if you are a person, and I have struggled with this in the past, being nervous, if you are a person like that, give it a go. It may not work for you, right? But it may. What are we up to? Number 6. All right. Always be setting and or reminding stakeholders of expectations. And so a stakeholder in this context could be anyone, right? It doesn't have to be the stakeholder to the traditional sense. If you're a consultant, sure, that's probably what you're dealing with day to day. If you're not a consultant, it doesn't matter. It could be anyone, right? And, you know, it could be another team, it could be a manager, it could be the people they work with. But there's a few things that come with setting expectations. We create clear boundaries. When we set expectations, we communicate how we work effectively. It gives me, the person setting the expectation, or you if you're setting it, it gives you an element of control. And it also defines a contract between the stakeholder and us. And so what sort of things might an expectation be? Well, you know, if we're doing software development, if we're in that side, it could be we don't ship on a Friday, right? Because nobody likes destroying their weekend. Nobody likes a tough Friday night when they're meant to be out doing something else. So maybe that's an expectation we communicate to our stakeholders. We don't ship on Friday, regardless. Like if you want to ship something, it's Monday. We have the rest of the week to deal with the consequences of shipping something on a Monday. It could be that there's a process for raising bugs. It could be that, you know, like, don't come to me with a bug, you know, stakeholder, this is the process, and we have this process because we need to capture the details, we need to triage these bugs, we need to prioritize them, keep track of them, and all that. In project delivery, it could be that we say to the stakeholders, look, we need to meet every 2 weeks. We need to talk through the risks. We need to align key dates. We need to, you know, keep our finger on the pulse, so to speak, for this delivery. Or it could be that, hey, look, the subject matter experts, SMEs, we need access to them. They need to respond in a timely manner. Like this is an expectation that we need to agree upon, that I want, and you know, I want some sort of confirmation, or there's a compromise, right? Or maybe, you know, on the flip side, maybe it's a manager who's directing you to work on many, many things. You know, you've just got constant context switches, and you're just getting nothing done. So maybe your expectation here that communicate to your manager is, hey, look, I'll work on one thing at a time. I work on that through to completion or a point at which I'm happy to stop, to put the tools down knowing that I can come back and pick it up. And so, you know, in that situation, that's probably more away from sort of the consulting side and, you know, into the everyday work, but it's a good one. And if you are in that situation, you can talk to your manager and you can explain to them why this is important. If you're a designer, you know, maybe that part of the side, maybe your expectation here is I do low fidelity designs until you pick one or two, and then I do the high fidelity stuff, right? I don't do high fidelity designs. I don't iterate a whole lot on high fidelity. So these are the things, you know, these are the expectations, these are the contracts, these are the boundaries, this is how I work efficiently. And, you know, yours will be different. But regardless, it's setting us up for a healthy working relationship, and it's also setting us up for success there. A good outcome, I should say, because that's in the title of the talk. Okay, so how do we, so now we've set expectations, how do we keep reminding people, or how do we keep these expectations in play? Well, there's two ways. We can do it directly. So for instance, let's say I'm on the delivery side and nobody's turning up to my 2 weekly meetings, and I'm like, we're not going to discuss the risks I see. And I could directly talk to them. I could talk to the stakeholders about how important these 2 meetings are. That's a direct talk. But we could do it indirectly. And this is my favorite, all right? Because it's just so easy. There's no hard talks. So how do I do it indirectly? Well, I just keep dropping it, in conversation, or I keep reminding people. And so if I'm in delivery and I'm doing my 2 weekly meeting, I go, welcome to review 5. Thank you for coming here today. As you know, meeting every 2 weeks is vital to this project's success, right? So I'm just, reinforcing these things that we've communicated and making sure they don't forget. And they won't if you keep reminding them. Indirectly works best, but sometimes you have to fall to directly, okay? Number 7. Yeah, this is another one of my favorites. There's no swearing, so it's not the favorite. A no is preferable to a yes which can't be delivered. Yep. And, it's hard to say no, right? For me particularly, I'm kind of like a people pleaser, so I tend to say yes. And I think it's because human nature, we try to favor agreement than disagreement. We want agreement. We want to avoid hard talks. But it often leads us to less desirable outcomes. And so, I think probably all of us can relate to this. So if says, someone comes up to you and says, hey, I need blah, 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 blah done by the end of the week. And you're like, yeah, sure. Yep. And then you're thinking, oh my God, why did I say that? There's no way I'm getting that done by the end of the week. And boom, you've said yes. It should have been a no. You've set yourself up for a less than desirable outcome there. Or something else has to give as a result, right? Or maybe it's like, can we have this feature ready to ship by July? And you're like, yeah, no worries, all good. Can you integrate X, Y, Z with blah, blah? Yep, I can do it. I can't. So when we say yes to things that should be a no, we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? Pretty much, or we're setting something else up for failure, right? Because we're gonna, it should have been a no. We said yes, so something's got to give. But why should we say no? Well, no is a starting point for discussion. So, it could be, no, I'm sorry, there's no chance we can get that done by the end of the week. But how about we work out a compromise? What is the middle ground here? How can I satisfy the person asking for something with the reality in which I'm living in, okay? It could be, I feel like integrating XYZ with XYZ. Well, that's the same, right? Like ZZY, sorry. Although Americans are different, so I'll allow it. Can we investigate a better solution? Maybe there's a better technology. Maybe it's a completely different way we can go about this. I know what you want, and maybe I can get us there on a path that I'm happy to say yes to, right? And so what you need to remember is the person coming to you is looking for an outcome, right? They're not necessarily looking for a yes. They've got something that probably is out of their control. They're having to come to you to say, we need to get this done. So they're looking for an outcome. And what's interesting is with this, especially in software development, is most of the time people have planned what you need to do. As the expert of software development, they're telling you what you need to do, right? Because what people are doing is they're trying to construct a world based on their knowledge, right? They're trying to construct something based on how they think it all should work, and they're iterating that to you. Now, they might not actually be doing that in the sense of this is how you do it. What they're trying to do is just communicate the outcome they want, and they're doing it the best way they know. And so what's funny here is most of the time that's an opportunity for us to step in, show them, hey, I know how this stuff works. I do it day to day. Let's chat, because I think there's a better way of doing this. I think, we can turn that no into a yes. And, great. At the end of the day, if we can deliver, if we can deliver their outcome, then they're happy, right? Number 8, jump in and get stuff done. Now, it's easy to volunteer for a task, put your hand up to do something that you've done before, that you're familiar with. There's no anxiety, you've done it. Yep, I can do that. And sticking to what we know is comfortable, but it's not great for progression of our learning. It's not great for progression of our career or building out our knowledge set, our skills. And instead, next time, try this. Push yourself to say yes. It's uncomfortable, but you're willing to say yes before. Why don't you say yes now? Like, push yourself a bit. And even when there's a better suited person, maybe you're on a team and, this person always does that stuff and I know how it works, but I'm not really comfortable with it. Push yourself because it's an opportunity to learn. And once started, you'd be surprised how quickly you can get into a task. The thought of that task is more daunting than probably the reality of doing that task. But the main thing is you're learning, you're expanding your knowledge, and you've added something else to that repertoire of, I've done it before, I can say yes to that. But the main thing is you're going to get a much better reward for achieving this, okay? When you volunteered to do something that initially felt uncomfortable. A much better reward than doing something you've already done before. But the most important thing is, and you need to remember this, is what is the worst case in this situation? It's not failure, which is probably what you immediately jump to. It's actually just asking for help, right? So if you volunteer for something and you go, I haven't done it before, feeling a little bit uncomfortable about this, but I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to push myself because Wade said I should. I might fail. No, that's not the worst. That's remotely not even the worst outcome here. It's asking for help. Maybe you go to that person in the team that has done it before and say, hey, can you give me a bit of help with this? Look, they'll be more than happy to help you. I guarantee it. Because you would probably be more than happy to help someone who's volunteered in your place and they've pushed themselves, right? Okay, number 9. Exercise emotional intelligence, EQ, by using it daily. So what is EQ? And this is where some actual facts come into my talk, by the way. I think there's like 1 or 2. But La Trobe Uni defines it as emotional intelligence is the ability to identify and regulate one's emotions and understand the emotions of others. A high EQ helps you build relationships in the kitchen, in the social interaction, reduces team stress, diffuse conflict, and improve job satisfaction. Ultimately, a high EQ means having the potential to increase team's productivity and staff retention. A lot of words. So let's go through it. Everybody knows what IQ is, right? Most of us are now starting to hear about EQ, and it's becoming a lot more noisy in our industry. Like, it's been talked about a lot more. So, most of you, I think, probably heard of EQ. Probably a fair few of you now are all over it going, EQ, I'm all over that. But let's just run through. Like, everybody knows what IQ is. So let's just compare it to EQ. IQ is the ability to think. EQ is the ability to feel. IQ is used to make, but EQ is used to navigate. IQ is static. EQ can get better or worse, right? Now you might be going, I can study and I can get a better IQ. No, what you're doing is just getting better at IQ tests, okay? Right? You're using your static IQ that you were born with, genetically encoded, and you're getting better at a test. But if you could have an IQ test that could test it accurately, you'd come up the same every time. IQ cannot be learned. EQ can be learned. So, they are quite sort of similar when you put them like that, but obviously they're fundamentally different things, but they go hand in hand. In the last 5 years or so, I've really noticed that EQ gets picked up, right? Because we're talking about, my colleague over here, Turtle, did a burnout talk at DDD. We're more open to talking about potential mental health issues, although you're not meant to call them mental health issues. Forget what they're called now, but we're talking about anxiety and depression, and the list goes on. And when you are of age and in the professional workforce, some of these things can come down through the workforce, okay? And so that's why we're talking about it, because businesses have a responsibility for EQ, and a burnt out employee is no good, okay? And so that's why we're focusing on it. Now, business is not necessarily focusing on it for the good of the people. They're focusing on it because, at the end of the day, business needs to churn over. They need to improve their bottom line, and happy workers help that, right? So, but why is EQ important to us? If we forget about the business, why is it important to us? Well, it's important because we can't simply rely on IQ anymore. And another fact, this is the second one, this is the last one, don't worry. Back to opinions ASAP. But La Trobe University summarizes a recent survey as soft skills are things like teamwork and effective communication, but also personal qualities like being passionate, conscious, and having a wholehearted go. They are in high demand. In a recent survey, 59% of hiring managers said soft skills were hard to find in job applicants. So they're looking. So people hiring. So workplaces have their own policies that are, have a large EQ flavor to them. But also people hiring now, they're not just looking for smart people. They're looking for smart people and people that have good EQ, okay? So it's important to us for career progression. It's important to us for our own mental health. And it's important to us because, life is not just, working or getting through to retirement. Life is to be enjoyed. And one way we can improve that, and one way we can make our own lives better is to build upon our own EQ. And you'd be surprised, when you start practicing EQ in the workplace, let's say you go up to someone and you're trying to talk to them and the interaction's not so good. And so you walk away and you're thinking, did I do something? Did I say something? Do they hate me? Maybe they're busy. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe I came at the wrong time. When we're using our EQ here, we're trying to navigate and feel. And we're trying to understand this situation. So maybe, we don't have to overthink it. Maybe we just go back later and they offer an apology to us. Or maybe we can think about how we can turn this situation around. Maybe by understanding what their emotional state is, we can address that so we can get what we originally went to them for addressed. Disobedient housekeeping, number 10. Very close to shit your pants with confidence. Very close. No swearing though. It won't win. So what is disobedient housekeeping? Well, to put it simply, it's housekeeping tasks that you do, that you kind of needed to ask permission to do them, but had you asked, they would have been rejected, right? And so in programming, we use the term tech debt for this. It's mostly used to describe things that we should be doing housekeeping for rather than taking on debt, knowing we have to pay it back. So if we said, we're working on a project, it's got deadlines, your team lead is focused on delivery, all right? Maybe there's a bit of pressure, and if you ask if you could do some housekeeping, they might say no, or they might likely say no. Saying no in that situation is setting you up for a bad outcome later on, right? So eventually that mess is going to get in the way. Eventually we're just going to label the whole system as legacy. But what we mean is that it's just so messy that there's no hope. Having been a team lead before, it's hard when someone says to me, can I do some housekeeping? They might not say, can I do housekeeping? But, fundamentally that's what they're talking about. And it's hard because I'm focused on delivery. I'm looking at dates, I'm feeling that pressure. If I'm doing Scrum, I'm looking at burn-up charts, but I just started saying yes. I just started saying, don't even ask, right? Because, yes, it may not be great for me in the next 2 weeks, but in 8 months' time, it's perfect, right? And my project's probably not going to go for 2 weeks. Disobedient housekeeping, I'm kind of a fan of. And if anybody's worked with Tristan, they'll understand it because he's pretty good at doing it. I don't even think he knows he's doing it, but really good dev just cleans up everything. You get gains from cleaning up that mess pretty quickly. Unfortunately, they're hard to put in a tangible term to justify. That's why sometimes we have to be a bit disobedient with it. And the other thing is, you might even start thinking with some of the disobedient things, like, why am I even asking? Like, why not? Isn't this just part of my job to produce software, to write code, and to always be making it better? Maybe you've got a Boy Scout, Girl Scout rule, which is essentially like, if you come across something, leave it in a better state than you were before you came across it. And I really like it. So that's number 10. But now we've got number 11. I know I said 10, but number 11 is pretty good, and I think you'll understand why it's in there. Promise the worst case, deliver the best case. How to be a rock star without even trying. Upfront impressions. Sometimes we try to impress up front and we put ourselves in a predicament. We've said yes to 11 things, and we didn't leave ourselves room to just bail out at 10. I don't think anybody here is angry that there's 11. But if I said we were going to do 11 and we only did 10, maybe. But look, what we're doing here is, it's just a little mind game. We've all heard it before. But yeah, look, we're promising the most likely, and anything we deliver after that is a bonus, and people are going to be happy for it. Okay? And it also leaves ourselves room. If we go back to sort of estimations where we left room, this is leaving ourselves room too. And so, yeah, it's a clickbaity title. I think I have one of my colleagues, maybe even Patrick. No, Paul came up with this. Patrick wanted the title of the talk to be more clickbaity, but Paul actually came up with this one. And yeah, it's pretty obvious. I don't think we need to talk about it forever and a day, but I think probably I'd leave you with this. How often do you practice it? Probably not all that much. You know about it, but how often do you practice it? And all I'm suggesting is you just try and use it a bit more. See how you go. Maybe it's so successful for you, you just include it as part of your full-time sort of communication set. Thank you. That's my talk.
Does anyone have any questions? Any comments? Anything they disagree with Wade? They want to share their own opinion that's not in line with what Wade just shared? Here we go.
Mate, Matt.
Would disobedient housekeeping also be considered theft?
Ooh, no. Unless
Can you
you
repeat the question?
Okay, so is disobedient housekeeping, is there the potential to be considered theft? If you are a contractor paid by the hour, maybe. But if you're an employee, absolutely not. Maybe setting yourself up for discipline, but if someone's going to say, mate, you cleaned up a mess and we're not happy about that, is that the right place you want to be working at? If you are a contractor, there are a whole load of other things that go into there. So maybe this has to be set as an expectation with stakeholders, that you will clean up as you go and it will be part of your hourly rate. Just like fixing bugs you created is a part of your hourly rate, okay? Anything else?
For me, no.
No, because last time, that's like, oh, mate, I've got this, yes. So has it improved? Todd?
So on the same topic, how much disobedient housekeeping is too much disobedient housekeeping? Because your position was, don't ask me, just do it.
Yeah.
I can see that being a slippery slope.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, and with everything, including the 11 things I've just shown you here, you have to apply some common sense to them all, okay? Maybe including context with your communication is not ideal for every single bit of communication, right? I don't think if I'm talking to Turtle via Slack, he wants context on every message I write to him. So, you've got to apply a little bit of common sense to this. You've got to understand the situation. And I think probably there, what you'd be looking at is if my cleaning up is impacting my ability to deliver, and that is being noticed, then you're probably doing a little bit too much cleaning and not enough mess making. All right. Sorry, I don't know your name. Jason.
I think it's important also how we frame it too. Disobedient housekeeping is good for kind of the talk, but I think we need to kind of say, actually, we're professional software developers, and when you hire a professional software developer, quality is what you get. And so, yes, we will do some activities from time to time to ensure the quality of the product you're getting. And if you don't like that, well,
Yeah.
There's cheaper software developers out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you repeat for
Yeah.
the streamer?
So, and I'm just going to summarize a bit. So Jason is saying basically a little bit what I think I slipped into my talk, but maybe didn't emphasize enough, is just include it in your everyday practice of cleaning up. Because you are a professional, you're of high standard, I would hope, and you want to take pride in your work. So why not clean up as you go and try not to leave mess?
Maintain that quality.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I'm the same. Like I balance being pedantic with the stuff I make and write versus having it be quality, maintainable, not messy. I don't want someone looking at it going, oh, what the hell is this? And yeah, so I think as we mature as an industry, this is just going to become more and more and more. Engineering, like civil engineers, they don't have this problem because they can't have mess. They can't have bridges falling over because it was a bit messy. Do you know what I mean?
Developed countries at least.
Well, yeah, that's true. I think that's it. I think that's time.
Yeah, okay. Any
Oh,
questions?
one more question?
Look, I've got us thrown about the civil engineers, but they can take 3 years to build a road.
Yeah, yeah.
Lock the traffic up, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't want that road to collapse under me while I'm driving along. So.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Wade.
Thank you.